This one, there's not a lot to see. You can see renal artery, renal vein, and same thing on the side, renal artery, renal vein. You know how there's like a depression, like that indentation on the medial side of each kidney where the arteries and veins go in and out? That's called the hilus. That is on your list, the renal hilus. Adrenal glands, I think those might be on the list, just on top of each kidney. The ureters are these tubes that exit of the kidney. The bladder is this structure. And that's all on here. So that one's not a whole lot. And then here is where you can see the internal structures of the kidney. So the two main regions are, what's the outer region? Cortex. And the inner region where the pyramids and everything else is the medulla, renal medulla. So you can see the pyramids, renal pyramids, or those pink triangles. Renal columns, I don't think is on the list. No, they're not. All right. Remember at the tip of each pyramid, you really can't see it because they're so tiny, but you have that little hole that urine actually like drifts out of. That's the renal papilla. So it is on your list, but I'm probably not going to do that because the hole isn't even here. You can't even see it, it's so small. But then once urine comes out of that hole, it goes into what's the first little channel that comes directly off of a pyramid? A minor calyx, right? And then where, especially down here, you can see it well, where a couple minor calyces come together, that forms a major calyx. And then right here, right before it turns into the ureter, right here is the renal pelvis, where all the major calyces kind of empty into. That's where all the urine collects before it comes out of the ureter. All right, and that's everything on here. So 6 to 8 questions will be on the urinary system, one of those two models, or actually both. I'm going to use both of those models. And then male and female reproductive system. So for both, we have models and the charts. So the chart, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time reviewing right now because I have it posted on Blackboard and it is labeled for you. So anything I could possibly ask on the chart, I have labeled on the picture that I posted for you guys. So you can easily look at that from home. For the male model, it's a lot better than the female one. So I do ask a lot of things on the male model and not a lot using the male chart. For the female, it's the opposite. The female model, you can't see as much, so I use the chart a little more for female. There are about 7 structures that I'm going to ask from male total. So some on the model, probably about 5 on the model and maybe 2 on the chart. And for the female, same thing, about 7 structures, but less on the model, more on the chart. So for the model, this comes off so you can see the inside stuff. So I do use both. I'll have some things labeled on the outside and a couple things labeled on the inside. So on the outside, glans, penis, remember that's the distal end, scrotum, testis, epididymis is that structure that's on top of it. Remember, spermatic cord is the blood vessels that suspend the testes. This tube is the vas deferens. And then that is a seminal vesicle. Remember, that's one of the 2 glands that's behind the bladder. And then what's that? What's the gland under the bladder? Yeah, the prostate gland. All right, so that's everything that I could ask on the outside. And then on the inside, oh shoot, not enough hands. This is the bladder, this whole thing. right below the bladder, what's that? The prostate again. Yeah, you're just looking into the middle of it now. All right, pubic symphysis is always, for males and females, it's right in front of the bladder. That's the cartilage where your two pelvic bones come together in the front. Okay, and then for the male, remember you have the 3 different sections of the urethra. So this is the prostatic urethra. Right underneath of it is the membranous urethra, and then the spongy urethra. The ejaculatory duct, remember that is the little tube that connects the vas deferens to the urethra. It's right here. You might not be able to see it, but up close you can see it. It's a little tiny tube inside the prostate gland. Okay, and the last thing is the tissue types that make up the penis. Do you remember the tissue that directly surrounds the urethra? The spongiosum, corpus spongiosum. That's why this part of the urethra is called the spongy urethra. And then the white tissue that's on the outside is corpora cavernosa. That's the other tissue. All right, so I will probably do about 5 questions on the male model and just a couple on the chart. For the female model, there's not a ton that you can see because you can't see the ovaries, the fallopian tubes that well. You can see the bladder. So here's the bladder. Here's the pubic symphysis right in front of it, just like for the male. Here's the uterus. And there are 3 layers of tissue in the uterus. Only one is on your list for the practical. It's the endometrium, which is the inner lining. That's shown in red. So that red layer is that endometrium. The opening at the bottom of the uterus, so it's not a specific part, it's just the opening at the bottom where it opens up into the vaginal canal, is called the cervix. So it's, I would give you that in my clue to you guys, like, you know, I always tell you, give you like a hint or something. So if I pointed there, I would say this is the opening, this opening at the bottom of the uterus. Okay, vaginal canal or vagina is this. Okay, the tube coming out of the bladder is the urethra. Coming out of the uterus is the vagina. Okay, and then a couple more things. In males, you don't have this, but for females, in front of the pubic symphysis, you have extra fat right here for like cushioning. That's called the mons pubis. It's on your list. And labia, which are part of the external genitals for female, are just really folds of skin, folds of tissue. Labia minora is the inner fold, and labia majora is the outer. Okay, so that's everything on here. I might have 2 or 3 things on here, and probably a few more on the chart. So I'm gonna not do the chart right now. If you guys want me to at the end, I can. But there's one last thing that is going to be on the practical. I'm going to show you guys. These are posted on Blackboard. In fact, it's your Blackboard page that I'm going to show you. So it takes a second for it to warm up. There will be only one cross section. I know most of you guys hate those. So there's just one, and this time I'm telling you exactly which one it is. And there's only about 3 questions on it. So it's a lot less than previously. So you know exactly which one is being used. I have it posted on Blackboard. I'm going to show you that right now. So 3 things on there. That is it. There is one last thing besides that cross section. So that will be, just like last time, I'll have it printed out in color so you can see everything pretty well. So that's up here. Cross section, and you have the answer key 2. All right, so it's this one, digestive and renal, because you can see a lot of the parts of the large intestine, like here, A and B, And then these are the two kidneys. See, what letter is it? D and I are kidneys. So your answer key is all the way at the bottom. See it listed at the bottom. So 3 on there. And finally, and this will make sense when we get to this in lecture, starfish development is actually, to begin with, it's all the stages are the same as human development. So the document that's coming up is so annoying. A few pictures. I have those two together. Okay, can you see starfish development on the left? So there's a few pictures on there, various stages of development, which are exactly like the stages of human development in the very just first couple of days of development. So there's only 5 terms on your list. I'm gonna have 1 or 2 using these exact same pictures. So exactly the same, they'll be in color, so they'll be purple like that. The 2-cell stage. So basically, as soon as you have fertilization, you form a single cell. The sperm and the oocyte, the egg, unite. You have a single cell for just a minute. And then it starts just dividing and dividing and dividing. So initially, that single cell becomes 2 cells. So that's easy. That's the 2-cell stage. So here, see that? Is the 2-cell stage. Those 2 cells then continue to divide and divide and divide. Eventually, after a couple days, you've got just a big mass of cells, like a big ball of cells. That's called the morula. So that's right here is an example of that. Okay, just a big solid mass of cells, bunch of cells. The blastocyst is when the morula, so it keeps, those cells keep dividing and dividing, have even more, but then a fluid begins to fill the inside of that ball of cells. So now it's a hollow center filled with fluid, with cells all the way around the outside. So these 3 pictures are the blastocyst. So you can kind of see it's a darker ring around the outside because that's where all the cells are. And then in the middle, it's lighter because it's filled with fluid. Do you guys, can you tell the difference between that and the morula? Okay. Those are the only 2 that sometimes people get mixed up, like when I've asked those on the practical before. And then finally, and this looks totally different from the rest of them. See these 2 here and here? That comes even later in development. That's called a gastrula. So those are all labeled for you. I'll have 1 or 2. The last thing on the list is called a blastomere. That's just the name for all of those cells. Like once you have that original cell dividing and dividing, all the cells that it becomes are blastomeres. So in the 2-cell stage, this is a blastomere, this is a blastomere. In the morula, every single one of these individual cells is a blastomere. In the blastocyst, every one of these cells is called a blastomere. So blastomere is just the name for a single cell that's in that ball of cells or in the blastocyst. Okay? So 1 or 2 at the most, just those exact same pictures. All right, so those 2 are just pretty much strictly memorization. Just remember exactly what those things look like. You'll be good for that. All right, and that's it. Extra credits. It says, based on the labs that we've done, there's going to be 2 questions based on the urinalysis and 2 questions about blood typing. The urinalysis is going to be, like if you see something in urine, what can that indicate? So the things that we talked about were glucose. What does that indicate? Diabetes. What about white blood cells in urine? Infection. Ketones. There's a couple things that can indicate. You just Anything? There's actually 3. Starvation, diabetes, or high protein, low carb though. Say low carb. So really low carb diet. Blood is usually just like physical trauma to the kidney or kidney stones. All right, so one of those. And then blood typing. So it's going to be 2 pictures of what you saw on your slides when you added the blood drop and then you added the antibody to identify the blood type. So you just have to remember if you saw clumping and you had added anti-A antibody to that blood drop. Saw clumping. What does that tell you? A. It definitely has the A antigen. What if you didn't see clumping in that one, but you saw clumping when you added the anti-B? So you're B, right. What if you didn't see clumping at all for either one? O. And if you saw clumping for both? AB, right. Same thing for the RH. If you saw clumping, what does that mean? You have that antigen. So you're positive, you have the RH antigen. And if there was no clumping, then you don't, so you're negative. Okay? So 2 of those and 2 about urine. Okay, any questions at all? So logistically, the way that it works, the way it's going to be set up is exactly the same as the midterm. So you'll have paper at each station with hints on it, telling you exactly what I'm looking for. It's still only 50 questions plus 4 extra credit.